Vivien Leigh's passionate affair with Laurence Olivier Part 2. A beautiful love story that turned into tragedy. Leigh and Olivier went on to star together in films such as 21 Days Together, 1940, and That Hamilton Woman, 1941, as well as a stage performance of Romeo and Juliet on Broadway. Critics, as in a 1940 article written in Time magazine, excoriated the couple's performance on Broadway and connected the adulterous start of their relationship to their roles on stage. Romeo and Juliet became a major financial flop for the couple, who had invested tens of thousands of dollars in their own savings to the project. The couple returned to England in 1943 to help with the war effort. Olivier joined the Fleet Air Arm, and Leigh went on a tour through North Africa in 1944 to entertain the armed forces stationed in that region. Shortly after the tour, Leigh became sick with coughing fits and fevers and was soon diagnosed with tuberculosis in her left lung. The actress spent several weeks in the hospital, during which time Olivier wrote to her constantly.
"Please, please, my angel, send me word of what the doctor said. Plus, if it is possible, ask him to send me a report," he wrote from Paris. "You're the only person in the world who could make hideously selfish me love another more than I do myself." Though she was advised to stop acting, Leigh persisted with her long-time passion. While filming Caesar and Cleopatra in 1945, Leigh learned she was pregnant, but soon suffered a miscarriage, which is said to have happened after the actress slipped on set. This sent her into a deep depression, and Leigh was so distraught that she would sometimes fall into hysteric crying fits on the floor. This would be the first of many bipolar disorder breakdowns to come. At this point, Leigh had learned to recognize her symptoms before an episode, which involved several days of hyperactivity, followed by a deep depression and a breakdown consisting of shivering fits and swear-filled tirades, according to the Hollywood Reporter. Often, Leigh would not remember any of this happening, but would feel sorry for those around her once they told her what she had done. Leigh took a break from filming and was never able to fully recover enough to continue the focus on the role of Cleopatra. During this time period, Leigh's work began to go downhill. Despite Leigh's work suffering, Olivier's career was skyrocketing, and he went on tour with actor Ralph Richardson for stage performances of Henry IV and Oedipus. Leigh, not feeling well enough to work again just yet, accompanied Olivier to watch his performances. Olivier was later knighted in a ceremony at Buckingham Palace, which granted Leigh the title of Lady Olivier. This proved to be a huge turning point in the couple's marriage, as Olivier thrived and Leigh's depression only worsened. In 1948, Leigh and Olivier went on a 6-month tour of Australia and New Zealand to perform and raise funds for the theatre. Leigh suffered severe insomnia at the time, and would sometimes let her understudy replace her in performances as she recovered. Still, the actress was dedicated to her career and did her best to keep up with the demands of the tour. But their relationship was slowly dwindling during this time, and Olivier and Leigh would often get into heated arguments over her mood swings, which were becoming increasingly difficult for Olivier to manage. Their worst argument occurred backstage in Christchurch, New Zealand, when Leigh refused to go on stage with Olivier because her shoes were missing. Frustrated with her behaviour, Olivier slapped Leigh in the face publicly, and she slapped him back. Within minutes, she was on stage again in borrowed shoes with a smile on her face, but Olivier would later realise that he lost Vivien in Australia. Even though her marriage was failing, Leigh did not let her passion for acting dwindle. In 1949, she was cast as Blanche Dubois in a West End production of A Streetcar Named Desire. The play was a huge success, and Leigh went on to portray Dubois in the film version. Though she received great critical acclaim for her performance, the huge success of the play and film took an emotional toll on Leigh that she would later say, "tipped me over into madness." In 1951, Leigh was heavily criticised by film critic Kenneth Tynan for her performances as Cleopatra in both William Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra and George Bernard Shaw's Caesar and Cleopatra alongside her husband. Tynan believed Leigh was a mediocre actress who made Olivia's performance suffer as a result. This negative review made Leigh become fixated on failure and terrified of receiving other negative criticisms. "Oh, sweet Baba, if we were together I expect this would seem quite exciting, but then that applies to everything in life," Leigh wrote in a letter to her husband on August 1, 1950, while on a plane. Another letter Leigh wrote at the time read, "Whenever you think of me, my Larry boy, you will know I am with you adoringly, Vivien." But the romance they had barely been holding together continued to fade. In 1953, Leigh suffered a nervous breakdown shortly after arriving in Sri Lanka, then Ceylon, to film Elephant Walk, with English-born Australian actor Peter Finch. The actress was immediately sent back home to Britain, where she underwent periods of incoherence and confessed to her husband that she'd been having an affair with Finch. Leigh's erratic behaviour included wandering naked through the gardens at night and sometimes falling into bed with strangers. It's unlikely this was the first time Olivier had heard about Leigh's unfaithfulness, but whether or not the reports were true, Leigh and Olivier did not give up on their marriage. The couple continued to appear together on stage, but their performances suffered as a result of their increasing lack of chemistry. During the time she was in a production of South Sea Bubble, Leigh learned that she was pregnant once again, and withdrew from the play as a result. But after her final performance on stage, the actress suffered another miscarriage, sending her into another period of depression that lasted several months. While on tour with Olivier for his role in Titus Andronicus, Leigh would have frequent outbursts directed at her husband and other members of the production. By 1958, having kept up appearances for nearly 10 years, Leigh considered her marriage to be over. She began seeing actor Jack Merivale, who knew of her tuberculosis and promised Olivier he would take care of her. At the same time, Olivier began an affair with actress Joan Plowright, who was 22 years younger than him. The pressure from her career and instability in her romantic relationships only made Leigh's emotional and mental state worse. By 1960, Leigh was threatening to commit suicide. "Vivien is several thousand miles away, trembling on the edge of a cliff, even when she's sitting quietly in her own drawing room," Olivier once said. Olivier and Leigh went on with divorce proceedings in May of 1960. The divorce was finalised later that year, and Olivier went on to marry Plowright. The couple later had a son and 2 daughters. Even though they were no longer together, Olivier and Leigh continued to write to one another every now and then. "I want to say thank you for understanding it all for my sake," wrote Olivier in a letter to Leigh regarding their divorce. "You did nobly and bravely and beautifully, and I am very, oh so sorry, very sorry, that it must have been much hell for you." Since her divorce from Olivier, Leigh enjoyed great success on stage and on the silver screen. Her depression continued to plague her during this time, but Leigh put her all into her performances. Her final film was 1965's Ship of Fools. Leigh's appearance in the film was a testament to her dedication as an actress, since she was very ill at the time and would often fall into fits of paranoia and fight with the other actors. Her fragile mental state made every day of filming more and more difficult, but she managed to finish, and Ship of Fools received rave reviews. In May 1967, Leigh was rehearsing to appear in Edward Albee's A Delicate Balance. However, her tuberculosis recurred and she was put on bed rest for several weeks. Her husband, Jack Merivale, left her at home while he went to perform in a play in Eaton Square. When he returned around midnight, he found Leigh asleep in bed. Half an hour later, he checked in to find her body on the ground. It appeared Leigh had attempted to walk to the bathroom and collapsed due to her lungs filling with liquid. Merivale alerted Leigh's family and then Olivier, who rushed from the hospital where he was being treated for prostate cancer to pay his respects. Merivale had moved her body onto the bed, and Olivier stood and prayed for forgiveness for all the evils that had sprung up between us. Olivier helped Merivale make funeral arrangements and stayed with Leigh until her body was removed. On July the 8th, Vivien Leigh was announced dead, and every theatre in London's West End extinguished their marquee lights for 1 hour in her honour. A memorial service was held at St Martin-in-the-Fields, and Leigh's cremated ashes were spread on the lake at her summer home, Tickeridge Mill in East Sussex, England. In one final letter addressed to Leigh only 5 weeks before her death, Olivier signed, "Sincerest love, darling, your Larry." Olivier died of renal failure on July the 11th, 1989, at the age of 82 at his home in West Sussex. Even after his marriage to playwright, Olivier held Leigh dear in his heart for the rest of his life. It is said that shortly before his death, Olivier was found watching a film starring Leigh and, with tears in his eyes, said, This was love."